Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well, and I hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 8 English lesson on pronoun. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English Language Arts, grade 8, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of pronouns. And this is going to be the last of the lessons on pronouns, right? Because we have been doing pronouns for some time, but as you can see, we had like a whole list of lessons that we had to complete under the chapter of pronouns. So this is now going to be the last of the lessons under pronouns. All right. So our chapter is going to be our chapter is going to be pronouns. Our subject is English Language Arts, grade 8. And then the lessons that we're going to be focusing on under the chapter of pronouns, it is compound subjects and objects with I and me, compound subjects and objects with pronouns, and choose between personal and reflexive pronouns. So that is going to be our lessons for today under the chapter of pronouns. All right. So when it comes to the compound subject and objects with I and me, then I is a subject pronoun, right? So I is a subject pronoun. So you can use it as the subject of a sentence or a clause. And when it comes to I, it tells that the speaker is doing something and it is usually at the beginning of a sentence. All right. If we look at an example, it says after finishing the experiment, I showed my teacher the results. So basically the subject pronoun I is the subject of that sentence. And then we have me, right? Me is also an object pronoun. So me is an object pronoun, whereas I is a subject pronoun. So I is a subject pronoun, whereas me is an object pronoun. So when it comes to the word me, then you can use it after an action verb. So you can use me after an action verb. You can also use it after preposition, like for example, at, for, of, to, or with. All right. So if we look at an example, it says, after finishing the experiment, my teacher showed me the results. And that is the object pronoun, me. And me usually comes after an action verb, or it can be used after a preposition. All right. So now we're going to continue by going into compound subjects and objects I and me. And we said I is a subject pronoun and it's usually at the beginning of a sentence, whereas me is a object pronoun and it usually comes after a action verb or a preposition. All right. So we see that an I is the beginning of the sentence, which is the subject pronoun. Me comes after an action verb or preposition, right? So now when it comes to the object pronoun me, right, we see that either comes after an action verb, right? And if you look at another example, it says, my teacher showed the results to me. So my teacher showed the results to me, right? And as you can see, that is a object pronoun, right? It comes after, and that is after the preposition, which is to, right? And when a pronoun is connected, when a pronoun is connected to a noun, right, with the word and, like for example, Rick and I or Rick and me, then it can be very hard to tell which pronoun is correct. And to tell which one is correct, we need to look at the sentence without the other noun. So we look at the sentence without the other noun. For example, Rick and I discussed the results with the teacher. So if you were to, let's say, look at the sentence without the Rick, without the word Rick, and then it'll sound like I discussed the results with the teacher, which means that it is in a subject. It's a subject pronoun that is basically, or let's say we took the I is in the subject of that sentence. I. The teacher discussed the results with Rick and me. If we were to if we were to remove the word Rick, then it would sound like the teacher discussed the results with me, which is an object pronoun. And me is used after a preposition with. All right, if we look at this example over here, we need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence, either I or me. All right, it says Mr. Kemp will show my mom and I, or my mom and me, how to make yogurt. So Mr. Kemp will show my mom and I, or my mom and me, how to make yogurt. We either need to choose I or we need to choose me. All right, and if we were to select the subject or the answer, we would say Mr. Kemp will show me, my mom and me, how to make yogurt. It will be my mom and me. All right, so there we are using me as our object pronoun. All right, let us go to our test. So we're going to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. All right, so we're going to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. Do we say Alec and I agree that the black dress looks better on you? Or do we say Alec and me agreed that the black dress looks best on you? We need to choose the subject, either I, or we choose the object me to answer the question. Is it I or me? So do we say Alec and I or Alec and me agreed that the black dress looks best on you? All right, then if we choose the correct one, we will say Alec and I agree that the black dress looks best on you. Still the subject pronoun. Mr. Kemp will show my mom and I how to make yogurt, or will show my mom and me how to make yogurt. So Mr. Kemp will show my mom and I how to make yogurt, or my mom and me how to make yogurt. All right, then if we choose the correct pronoun, we will say Mr. Kemp will show my mom and me how to make yogurt. All right, so now we need to select the correct pronoun to complete the sentence. The stray cat fled from Dale. Is it Dale and I, or from Dale and me? The stray cat. It fled from Dale and I, or it fled from Dale and me. So we can say the stray cat fled from Dale and from me. Usually we put the word I if it's like, at the beginning of the sentence. Reporters seem to descend on my lawyer, and is it my lawyer and me, or my lawyer and I, from all directions? My lawyer and me, or my lawyer and I? All right, so we can say reporters seem to descend on my lawyer and me from all directions. All right. Now we're going on to the next lesson, which is compound subjects and objects, and compound subjects and objects with pronouns. So you can basically use a subject pronoun as a subject of a sentence or clause. It will tell you who is doing something, and it is what is usually in at the beginning of the sentence, right? The subject pronouns that you can maybe use at the beginning of the sentence are words like I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. So after finishing the experiment, I showed my teacher the results. So which means that the subject pronoun I is the subject of the sentence. I think this is the same as discussed earlier on. All right, so now we need to just select the pronoun and complete the sentence. The pilot invited him and his brother into the cockpit before takeoff, right? So now it means that we are going to even add words like him, her, I, you, he, she, it, we, they, for example. It, us, you, me. That is what we're going to find out. All right, so we can say the pilot invited him and his brother into the cockpit before take off. So him and his brother. All right, here's another one that says Layla greatly admires him and the other volunteers. We can even say admires her and the other volunteers. All right. Please don't interfere with and their private affairs. If we're saying their private affairs, then we can say, please don't interfere with them and their private affairs. All right. So it says, for Thanksgiving, Roger, do we say Roger and I, or do we say Roger and me, made gravy and the butternut squash? All right. So here we will say Roger and I made the gravy and butternut squash. All right, so now we're going to our test. So we say don't interfere with, is it don't interfere with them and their private affairs? Don't interfere with they and their private affairs. All right, and if we choose the correct one, we can say please don't interfere with them and their private affairs. Lyle greatly admires. Do we say him and the other volunteers, or do we say he and the other volunteers? All right. So do we say Lyle greatly admires him or he? All right. So we can say Lila greatly admires him and the other volunteers. Because, like I said, you can either say him or you can say her, but in this case, it is only him, right? All right. So we can say, you may not remember that incident, but your father, do we say your father and I do? Or do we say your father and me do? All right. So we can say, you may not remember that incident, but your father and, do I say my father, your father and I, or do your father and me? So it's the father and I do. We need to select the correct pronoun. As Sophia slept, Mr. Stevenson wrapped a blanket around she and a doll or around her and a doll. All right, so we can say as Sophia slept, Mr. Stevenson wrapped a blanket around her and her doll. So Steve and I picked up a dozen pizzas. So Steve and I picked up a dozen pizzas, which, do we say us and our guests then quickly devoured, or do we say which we and our guests quickly devoured? All right, so you can say Steve and I picked up a dozen pizzas, which we say us or we. Which we and our guests then quickly devour. All right, so now we're going to go on to compound subjects and compound and objects with pronouns. All right, so we're gonna go to our test. This is basically also almost the same way we have our compound subjects as well as our object pronouns, right? So we need to select the pronoun to complete the sentence. So please don't interfere with, I think like they're repeating words now, them and their private affairs. Let me just see. I think, I'm not sure if I went to the same one or it's like they're repeating it. Let's go to the last one. We need to choose between personal and reflexive pronouns, right? We said personal pronouns, or let's say first reflexive pronouns are pronouns that either end in self or that end in selves. Like, so we have a singular, this our singular subject end in self, but it also needs to agree with the subject thereof. And then our plural subject, right? It ends with selves and it also needs to agree with that specific subject, right? When it comes to pronouns, personal pronouns are, for example, where you're referring to someone else. If you maybe write then a note, then you're writing it to someone else. But with the reflexive pronouns, it refers back to the subject. For example, I, myself. So if I, for example, say myself needs to refer back to I, right? Yourself needs to refer back to you. Herself needs to refer back to either she or Jade or Jada. Himself needs to refer back to him or he or John, Jack, whatever a name can be. Itself needs to refer back to it, and so on. All right. If we select now the the correct pronoun, right? And then we can choose between personal and reflexive pronoun. It says select the best pronoun to complete the sentence. He impressed. Do we say he impressed myself or impressed me with his knowledge of Greek myths and legends? All right, so we can say he impressed me with his knowledge of Greek myths and legends. So we say me. That is the pronoun where we say me. He impressed me with it, right? We didn't have to go back to refer to whoever. She summoned. Do we say she summoned ourselves or she summoned us to the conference room for an emergency meeting with the president of the company? So we're going to say she summoned, is it ourselves or she summoned us to the conference room for an emergency meeting with the president of the company? All right, if we look at the next one, we can say she summoned us to the conference room for an emergency meeting with the president of the company. All right, so us is correct. All right, so we will say for this assignment, should we measure ourselves in inches or centimeters, or should we measure us in inches or centimeters? So for this assignment, should we measure? And let's say ourselves. So ourselves is correct. This weekend, I am dedicating. Do we say I'm dedicating myself to taking care of the chores that I've piled up? Or this weekend, I'm dedicating me to taking care of the chores that I have piled up? All right, so we can then say this weekend I am dedicating myself to taking care of the chores that I have piled up. So myself to protest the logging of old growth forests. All right. So we can say to protest the logging of old growth forests, demonstrators stationed. All right, so we can say to protest the logging of old growth forests, demonstrators stationed can say themselves outside the Capitol building. So themselves is the answer. Let's do one more. After the game, the tennis player criticized himself or itself for the weak services. And himself is correct. As long as it refers back to yourself, then we can call it a reflexive pronoun, right? All right, that is now the end of our lesson on pronouns. Thank you very much, grade 8s. I really hope that you're going to have a good weekend further. Goodbye. All right. So that is the end of our lesson. Thank you very much. Goodbye, grade 8s.